right, what's up, Making Midwest? Huge thank you to the event planning team and volunteers for putting on this incredible conference. And thank you for inviting me here. It's an incredible honor. Also, shout out to Millcraft, which is one of the sponsors. My aunt works there and has been giving me free paper samples forever, so thank you. All right, so I made the short drive down from Cleveland, aka Columbus's little brother that gets picked on quite often. Probably because we're known around the world for getting dumped by LeBron James twice. Our river catching fire a record number of 13 times. Yeah, that thing that's supposed to put out fire, highly flammable in Cleveland. And we're also known for being stuck in the glory days of rock and roll. So every big thing that happens here, without fail, gets the Royal Electric Guitar treatment. But we're also known for our thriving art culture. In 2014, we installed an outdoor chandelier in our theater district, roughly 30 public murals in the past 2 years, and 3 Cleveland signs in parks with a view that are in every other couple's wedding photos. So all of these wonderful public art pieces, even though 7 months of the year, we are hibernating indoors. Yep. Cleveland's official slogan is "This is fine." Although I like to poke fun at it too, Cleveland has given me one hell of a lettering-based career in just a couple of years, which is why I'm here today. Like you said, I'm a creative consultant who specializes in hand lettering and murals. My work is very much an extension of who I am. It's high energy, and there's a lot going on because silence and negative space are something that makes me a little uncomfortable. In fact, there's only negative space here because where I'm standing is now a 2-story building. Anyway, I dabble in different styles and genres, but the goal is always, always the same: to inspire others by bettering myself. 2018 was my first full year of being full-time freelance, and it was definitely one for the books. I painted exactly 30 murals, mainly around Cleveland, but I also painted one in San Francisco, a live mural in Philadelphia, one here in Columbus at Wolf Ridge Brewing Company, and the big one in France. The city of Cleveland hired me to go over to Rouen, France for 2 weeks to collaborate with local artists on this mural, celebrating our 10-year anniversary of being sister cities. Hands down, it was the coolest experience ever and one hell of a first-time trip to Europe. So Cleveland is actually great, and really this is fine. 2019 has been amazing so far too. I'm currently working on my 17th mural, so I'm still on track to complete another 30 this year. I'm also writing a book on how to hand letter in vintage-inspired type fonts. Another highlight was being a keynote speaker at the National Student Show and Conference in Dallas this year, alongside my heroes. You may have heard of them, and if not, you should look them up. It's Lisa Kindon and Tad Carpenter. And Tad actually might be the biggest fan of the Midwest. He's based in Kansas City. So, how did all of this happen? By being terrified of absolutely everything and learning to just do it anyway. I know it's really not that easy, and that's why I'm giving a whole talk on it, but I found that the joy of the outcome outweighs my fears going into it when all is said and done. In this talk, I'll go over how I got to where I am now, and then discuss 5 of my biggest fears while freelancing, fears that you've probably experienced too, and then the joy I used to combat that fear. So part 1, the journey. So, this is the most accurate photo of me from high school. For anyone that doesn't know what any of this is, these are some of the most popular albums in the mid-2000s. And by popular, I mean among sad youths like me at the time. Just looking at these covers should tell you how delightful and happy I was as a teenager. I was so tired and sad and the epitome of emo, short for emotional, all 4 years of high school. And looking back on it, I had a great high school experience. I played sports, I had a great group of friends, and I stayed really busy. But I also had a huge feeling of not belonging and feeling left out. My confidence level was actually the name of an emo band, all-time low. So, doodling the saddest, most dramatic song lyrics during class was what brought me comfort and gave me purpose. Hard to believe now, but at some point in my life, these words were so powerful and relatable for me. Drawing them was a way I could express myself. The funny thing is, I had zero clue that this was hand lettering, and I didn't even know what the word typography was a thing either. But this was my favorite thing to do. So when 2008 hit, I was graduating high school and trying to find a major that I both enjoyed and that would get me a job after 4 years of college. Since I thought that the last generation of people to make a living from drawing and painting died in the early 1900s, I went with graphic design because in my teenage mind, it was simple. Computers equals job. Have I tried to design anything before? No. I like picking MySpace backgrounds, that's not mine, and choosing fonts and colors for my AIM profile. 18-year-old logic. For the next 4 years, it was a complete blur, all thanks to the most stress I've ever had to endure in my entire life. And a little bit thanks to Four Locos, which apparently was invented here by these bros. Thank you for the damaged brain cells, Columbus. So, why was college so rough? Because high school was apparently a walk in the park academically speaking and literally nothing else, but because the design program at Dayton was pretty brutal, if you wanted it to be. You see, the weirdest thing about design is the timing. It's not like solving for X where you find X and it's done. In design, there's always going to be room for improvement. You can drive yourself crazy testing out the ideas that pop into your brain or testing out different combinations of things to try to make it just a little bit better or make your work stand out just a tad more. But in college, I tried to spend as much time on my projects as possible, testing out these different adjustments here and there, so every detail in every portfolio piece was designed well and well thought out. But the whole time I was in college, I didn't hand letter anything. Again, I still didn't know lettering was a term. I really did like graphic design, and I was hyper-focused on aiming to be good at that. I did take 2 typography courses, and they were hands down my favorite. So for 4 years, I was nonstop practicing the art of choosing a typeface for different projects to evoke different emotions, and I was also learning how to arrange typography in a composition, 2 things that would be imperative to future Lisa. Working my butt off in college and collecting a couple design awards along the way really paid off because it secured me a paid internship as a junior art director in downtown Cleveland. All my Mad Men dreams were coming true. So when I moved back to my parents' house in the suburbs of Cleveland, I was humbled to be in the same space as I was when I grew up. It brought back a flood of memories, and naturally I began to keep a journal, and I started hand lettering song lyrics in it again. Lettering lyrics outside of my job turned into a side hustle with the help of posting my work to Instagram. I was getting hired by friends, family, and coworkers for just tiny commissions like baby showers, wedding gifts, and all that. Also thanks to Instagram, I finally discovered what hand lettering was, simply by going down a black hole of typography-based hashtags and accounts. This led to a huge surge of inspiration, and I could not stop lettering. Soon I was attracting clients of my own and doing workshops around town. These requests were coming in because I was being vulnerable and sharing my artwork online and putting myself out there. I used to be super, super shy, but I started going to networking events around town and found myself that after a few drinks, people are just people, and finding common ground is key. Being vocal on Instagram helped a lot too. I wanted to plant myself in the lettering community on Instagram, so I started commenting on everything and increasing my engagement, while having fun and making new internet friends along the way. It was a very slow process, but from 2012, when I graduated college, to 2017, when I finally quit the advertising world to start my own business, I had built an Instagram account of 10,000 followers, a list of happy and returning clients, and a new portfolio that focused all on lettering and less on graphic design, even though I still use a ton of graphic design practices for my lettering work. Even at the beginning of 2017, I was still very much that shy girl that feared almost everything and never thought of going full-time freelance. I didn't think that was a possibility. Advertising gave me a steady job with good benefits. I loved my job, and I thought it was fun and fulfilling. But in the fall of 2017, I was asked to work on 6 murals that were going to be statement pieces in the new headquarters of a company called GBX Group. And I had to complete it in a very aggressive timeline. Knowing that I couldn't take this all on with a full-time job, this project felt like a sign from the universe to finally push me to make the jump. And spoiler alert, it happened. The next step was getting my ducks in a row. I had already saved up 5 to 6 months of living expenses, thanks to my side hustle income. I had just gotten married, so I was able to jump on my husband's healthcare plan, which made things a little easier. And with the 6-wall mural, I had some other steady projects coming in that I could sustain an income. So I would work a shift at the mural site, go home, and work on these smaller projects. Most importantly, one of my high school friends is an outstanding accountant, so she set me up as an S-corp and did magical tax-related things to really prepare me to be an actual business owner by law. If you're thinking about starting a side hustle or want to take your side hustle to the next level, I suggest these 2 books. Overlap by Sean McCabe, which, if you go to his website and I think tweet a link for the book, you'll get a free PDF of it. So it's free. And then The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. The 6 walls at GBX turned into 7 by the end of the project, and that takes us right up to the beginning of 2018, so you guys are now all caught up. Which brings us to part 2, my 5 biggest freelance fears, the fun stuff. So, I'm a person who's terrified of a ton of things. I hate flying. I am terrified of the dark. I can't even look at spiders. That spider is not real. It's the cutest thing, but I couldn't look at any of the pictures of the real ones. And I have a crippling fear of heights, just to name a few. Luckily, the stage is not too tall. After quitting my job, I was given a brand new set of fears that I had to deal with, and I didn't want my fear and anxiety to hurt my business. Fear is like fire. It can either cook your food or burn your house down. I learned very quickly that if I wanted to be really great at my job and keep elevating myself, I needed to squash these fears and really focus on being self-motivating and dig deep to get that courage to just do things anyway. And it's kind of crazy. As human beings, we could take ourselves out of a clear mindset just by clouding our visions with fear and anxiety, but we also have the ability to look past our fears and be self-motivating. That in itself is the miracle of life that I tried to hone in on. But like most things, it's way easier said than done. I'm going to talk about, I'm going through a list of 5 things that I had to deal with, and I'm still working through today. And then the joys I tried to focus on to overcome these fears. First up, the fear of starting. How many of you have stared at a blank page before and felt a little intimidated? Yeah. This fear was instilled in me at a very young age, way back in grade school. It would be the first day of class, and I had a new notebook that smelled like the precious whiff of Office Max, and we would have to start taking notes. I felt so much pressure for these notes to look immaculate because page 1 sets the precedent for the rest of the year. And these are none of mine. These are too pretty to be mine. I know I cheated. And I still get that feeling before I paint a mural or I go to hand letter something on my iPad. The fear of starting has caused me to even procrastinate some of my biggest projects, like writing a book or writing this talk. But luckily, we have an antidote to combat the fear of starting, and that is the joy of flow state. Flow state is when you get really into your groove and lose track of time because you're so wrapped up in what you're working on. I know that I'm in flow state when I see that it's 10 p.m. and 5 minutes later it's 2 a.m. and I'm wide awake with adrenaline. For real, flow state is truly magical and you feel invincible in your creativity. But how do we get there? By making your hobby a habit. I've heard that if you do anything for 2 weeks straight, it becomes a habit. And it's going to start feeling really strange if you don't do that thing on day 15. It's like when you get that really gross feeling of going to bed without brushing your teeth, and you think to yourself, no, I just need to get out of bed and do it. For me personally, my habit was born out of my first passion project. So back in 2013, I was living in a tiny studio apartment in Cleveland that was filled with old textbooks from college that my parents didn't want crowding up at their house, and I was too lazy to sell back to Amazon, back when Amazon was a bookstore, when just sold books. So I took one of them and decided to hand letter over the text. Like a book, I wanted my sketchbook to have a chronological order. So I started listening to songs, all of them were emo, and I chose the song Better Son/Daughter by Relo Kiley. It didn't have any repetitive lyrics, so it was the perfect sad ballad to letter throughout the whole book. For each part of the song, I would break it up a couple words per page, and I gave that page its very own unique style, thus teaching me a ton of styles and different themes. I didn't get to work on this every night, but I found myself craving to work on this. And when I finished the book, all I could think of was, what can I make next? Thus, a habit was born. Last year, I also wanted to get back into that groove and do a long-term-ish project, so I tried to participate in something on Instagram called Inktober. You pick a theme, and you draw something every day in the month of October based on that theme. And I really don't know that much about it, and I ended up abandoning the prompt I chose about halfway through. But I finally got around to experimenting with something that I always loved the look of, drawing on leaves. Because people have drawn on leaves before, I wanted to make this project a little different and unique. So I started with a witchy theme, which later turned into horror and Halloween type shows. This was such a blast to work on. It made me fall in love with lettering all over again, and Ohio's best season. I can't encourage passion projects enough. If you're interested in getting into your own creative flow state and need a passion project, I suggest making a list of things that inspire you or that you're interested in, and then try to combine 2 or 3 of those things on your list, and boom, you have a passion project. Aside from picking a very lengthy project to work on, if you have something that you're scared of starting, what I typically find helpful is just working on that thing for 5 minutes. Just get out your calendar, schedule 5 minutes to work on that project, and I guarantee it turns into something longer than that. So the next one is the fear of failure. Do we have any fellow perfectionists in the room? Yep. The fear of imperfection and failure can drive people insane. Real Black Swan vibes. The fear, I listen to a lot of self-helpy type books while I work, and I know that failure and mistakes are inevitable and can actually be crucial to your growth if you learn from them. But I still want my artwork to look good and not like a bunch of mistakes on a page. My fear of imperfection comes out the most when I'm asked to show in an art gallery. I have been fortunate enough to have had art shows every year since 2014. But every time I'm asked to be in one, I immediately devise a plan to make it perfect, and sometimes the harder I try, the worse it turns out. Which is why I went as far as making a sticker out of the gravestone of author Charles Bukowski. Keep it simple and don't be a tryhard. However, I try to combat the fear of failure with the joy of learning. My first art show was at my alma mater, the University of Dayton. I was asked by one of my professors, Kathy, who saw that I was lettering a lot on Instagram, and she wanted me to come in and display my work and talk to the students about the real world and side hustling just a couple years after I graduated. I kept the show very loose and very casual because that's how my work was. I was lettering on a bunch of different things like scrap paper, moleskin pages, notebooks, and tracing paper. I just tacked it all up to the wall because it was a very accurate visual of what my process looked like at home. And this first art show was one of my favorites. It felt like a huge success, and I got a lot of compliments, and it was a nice little confidence booster. Did I apply anything I learned from my first art show to my second one? No. I am finding more and more that sophomore slump is a very real thing. So for my second art show, I was asked to show at a gallery in Canton, Ohio. I got super excited and immediately was wrapped up in what I was going to make and how I was going to make it, not why I'm making it. So after putting it off for a while, I finally settled on a music theme, starting with the 50s and doing a piece from each decade on. Tim, the gallery owner, was a huge help and came up with the idea of doing lyrics that weren't really words like shoo-bop, shoo-bop. So, long story short, I put myself in super unfamiliar territory. I worked on larger pieces than usual. I used color, which I normally don't, and I thought now would be a good time to get back into screen printing to help save on time. Ha. The worst moment was when I took a whole day off of work and spent the whole day trying to get Lady Gaga's Bad Romance piece sketched out. It looked horrible, and I was mentally shutting down. I just wanted it to be perfect, and nothing I was sketching out was working. Mark, my fiancé at the time, now husband, came home from work, and we went on a much-needed walk. I told him what was going on, and right away, he was like, "Oh, you should do Outcast, the shake it like a Polaroid picture part." It ended up being the crowd favorite, and I hate him for it. When all the pieces hung up, I stood back and saw work that was super underwhelming. It all looked rushed and half-assed. It showed signs that the ideas were underdeveloped. The work didn't show any of my lettering strengths, and there was only a handful of pieces that I didn't wince at. Only one print, the Outcast piece, sold, but how could I expect anyone to enjoy what I didn't like myself? What I did take away from this experience was that I needed to not be so focused on making the final work look perfect, and I can't put unrealistic expectations on myself. Instead, I needed to learn what I'm comfortable with and what my strengths are, and what I actually enjoy creating, because that's what people are going to want to see anyway, something that the artist made a blast working with. I also started saving the experimenting for my own personal work and not for a whole art show. A year later, I had the opportunity for another art show. Instead of giving up, I got fired up. I needed this one to succeed this time to prove myself that I could do an art show. But I learned that it doesn't need to be perfect, and I just need to focus on what I learned from the last failure. So I stuck to my favorite color palette, which is black and white and gold, and I made the pieces much, much smaller. For 3 months, my art hung in a popular coffee shop in Cleveland called Rising Star Coffee, and it sold like crazy. I try not to dwell on what ifs, but I probably wouldn't have found the success if I didn't have the challenges of the Canton Art Show under my belt. For the next 2 art shows, I got really smart, and I used the same body of work, just adding 10 new pieces to the whole set at a time. This way, it kept things both fresh and manageable. If you have a big project coming up that you want to be perfect, I highly suggest giving yourself enough prep time and set manageable, realistic goals. And also look at what worked well for you or someone in your position in the past and learn from that. Then go get it, girl. So our third fear, the fear of scarcity. If you have your own side hustle or own your own business, chances are you've experienced this one before. This is probably my biggest fear. I am terrified of not having enough money or work coming in now that I'm running my own show. This leads me to take on way too many projects at once, then not having enough time to properly execute them all. In fact, I haven't had a slow period in my business since the end of 2017 because of this fear. Aside from rushing projects and producing mediocre work, there are all sorts of issues that come from this fear, like not charging enough money for your work and not making enough time for things outside of work. There are also some benefits to this fear too. This is one of those fears that might cook your food. My fear of scarcity is what helps motivate me to do project outreach and make new connections. Taking on a bunch of projects also helps make better design decisions quicker, and it helps me be more proficient overall. So it's okay to have some of this fear, but when you are down to submitting a whole book manuscript in just 2 weeks, when you have had months to work on it, you have to stop and ask yourself, where did I go wrong? Answer, it was the fear of scarcity. To combat it, I use the joy of boundaries, which I'm also calling Project FOMO and Project JOMO, the fear of missing out and the joy of missing out. So for real, I'm working on a how-to lettering book about my favorite topic, vintage-inspired fonts. However, I did give myself only 2 weeks to write it and an additional week to draw out the images. In theory, I thought that for the whole month of June, I was going to be able to paint murals during the day and then come home and work on the book at night. It seemed foolproof, except I would completely crash after painting a mural for 9 hours straight. So I finished a couple bigger mural projects at the beginning of June, and then I got down to 2 weeks before this book was due. I had most of the artwork done. I just needed to write out the instructions and then draw some of the additional how-to graphics. I blocked my calendar and told my other clients that I needed to focus on writing my first book. And luckily, they were understanding. Some were even excited for me because they're Midwesterners. Thus, I discovered the joy of boundaries and will definitely be using this tactic moving forward. But did I take on some smaller projects while I blocked off time on my calendar to write this book? Yes, of course I did. I'm a monster. I worked on a book cover for some publishing company in Canada, and it was set up to be a quick book cover project. They had a direction already after the photography-based one failed, and they just needed some simple lettering with some basic illustrations. It was death by a million paper cuts. We went through 7 rounds of revisions, which is normal for a normal book cover project, but it caused me to stay up late and work a little extra on my own book. Again, the joy of boundaries is to help give you focus on your top priorities and avoid interruptions like these. So for this fear, I have put myself in so many bad situations like this that I have begun to do what I should have been doing the whole time, adding buffer time to my estimated timelines. In the moment, I want to impress my clients so much that I give them quick turnaround times, and then I suffer myself to get all the projects done on time. So to utilize boundaries, I started really using the all-day, everyday feature on Google Calendar. I just kept clicking the all-day button when I scheduled projects, focusing on just one project at a time, and then saving tiny ones for maybe in between the cracks, but never scheduling more than 2 projects on a day. In the book I mentioned earlier, The Productivity Project, it talks about how you should aim to complete 3 tasks a day. I use an app called Wunderlist, and it's just a basic checklist app. but clicking those 3 completed to-dos every day has done wonders for my anxious mind. Life is too short to work yourself to death, so definitely start setting boundaries and making time for the people that you care about. So those were 3 pretty serious fears, and I just wanted to throw a fun one as a quick intermission. So the next is the fear of heights. I mean, it's kind of ironic to be a mural artist and be absolutely terrified of heights. And there's a quote I love that sums it up perfectly that I actually got to paint as a mural at a very comfortable height. And that is, it never gets easier, you just get better. Word. There have been a handful of murals where I literally thought I was going to die doing what I loved. And one of those times was the mural in France. I had to paint the letter S, which is at the very top of a whole gymnasium. Fate's cruel joke, because I have a slight lisp and I used to get made fun of for. No joke, for my birthday in 2016, I went to Starbucks to get my free cup of coffee, and the cup came back reading Letha instead of Lisa. It's okay. Thank you. So S is not my favorite letter, and it's the hardest to hand letter. It's just terrible. So I'm in France, second-guessing their electrical equipment because the low battery alarm keeps going off for no reason. I made one of the local artists go up the lift with me while I sketched out the letter in chalk. Then, once I was getting more comfortable with it, I was able to go up there by myself and paint the letter, add the details, and the drop shadow. While I'm up there, the 2 local artists were on the scissor lift, so mine goes up and down, and theirs is like that arm lift. On the mural site itself, there were a lot of things in the way, like a very tall street lamp and tall nets for the basketball court. So as the artists are trying to maneuver around all this crap, they bump into my lift. And after that, I really questioned if I was in the right line of work. Right away, I started considering maybe grabbing a green apron to go be a barista at Starbucks and start doing meaningful work, like avenging all those names of the poor people they mess up. But no, I finished the letter S and almost cried because the joy of making huge-ass artwork will always be worth it. I've climbed up terrifying tiers of scaffolding while people walking by have commented on my death before, which has happened more than once. And I have swung around on scissor lifts. I've racked back and forth on tall-ass ladders on top of uneven ground, and even though it's not my favorite thing to do, the murals have always gotten done and have always been worth it. I found that I can't listen to anything through headphones while I'm up there painting higher than normal, so I put my phone on speaker and listen to something light and funny. Also, looking at the sidewalk from a distance helps ground me and makes me feel that I'm really not that high off the ground. So if you have a personal phobia that's keeping you from doing what you love, you just have to focus on the bigger picture and maybe test out a couple of things that help you cope with your fear. And finally, the last fear, fear of pressure. Uncle Ben's words occasionally pop into my head. With great power comes great responsibility. Oh, poor Uncle Ben. It's really the best. It's really the best and worst quote because it's insanely true. With some of my bigger, higher-paying murals, when I get really, really close to completing the project, but it's taking longer than usual and it's getting really, really late, I start to feel an enormous amount of stress and pressure. I get kind of sweaty and shaky and start to feel a panic attack coming on. It's hard to explain the feeling, but if you've ever tried putting a thread through the eye of a needle and have really struggled with it and your hand gets all tingly, that's the feeling. So the first time it happened to me was the most intense, and it was during the 6-wall mural project I talked about earlier. I was on the last wall, and I had a small section of logos left to paint. Oh, there's my clicker. So right here. It was about midnight, and the weight and responsibility of this project just came crashing down. This was my first big freelance project, so it had to be perfect. It was setting the stage for all my future projects. The logos I had to paint had to be perfect because they're logos. And unfortunately, I left the most technical item for last. I have never felt as much pressure and responsibility before. So I began to cry uncontrollably. And then the lights shut off. And if you remember, yeah. So luckily my husband was there to keep me company because when the lights turned off, I lost my shit. He was there to calm me down and help shift my mind to thoughts of gratitude, as well as find the light switch timer. He told me to try to focus on things like sleeping in tomorrow morning and the accomplishment that was completing a 6-wall mural project. It might not be fun right in that moment, but painting this mural beat any job I did as an art director. And this mural would be in the news. So thanks to Mark, I calmed down and focused my thoughts to the joy of gratitude. And soon I was feeling like myself again, and the heated, shaky feeling vanished. I am also happy to report that this incident has never happened again, and there's only been flare-ups. But my husband, as well as others, have been there to ground me with gratitude. In fact, I've made a list of things I'm grateful for on my phone, and I could just go back and read it when I need it the most. Just recently, I was at a company about an hour away from where I live now, and I had the realization that I had 3 more hours of work left, and it was already 10 p.m. So before I panicked, I read my list, and then I called my husband. He not only made me feel grateful for everything I had going in my life, he also made the hour-long drive to help me wipe off the chalk marks on the mural and cut the amount of time I had left in half. Murals without fail take longer than I anticipate, always, but thankfully I'm gaining more and more help to speed up the process and take some pressure off myself. And these are my parents, they're here today, so thank you. So when I do start to get that warm feeling and that sense of pressure building up, all I have to do is take out my phone, read my list of things I'm most grateful for. It's something so incredibly simple, but when my mind starts to drift off course, this list is the compass that keeps me back on track. And I bet you've experienced moments in your life like this too, where maybe stress has clouded your thought process and you ended up making mistakes because you weren't yourself. I found that taking a deep breath and a step back definitely helps. I call this stressing to blessing. Growing up, I heard the phrase, count your blessings, all the time. So much that I kind of became numb to it and it lost meaning for me, but it's funny how things come back full circle. Being a freelancer is really stressful, so I find myself counting my blessings quite a bit. But doing so helps reassure me that I've accomplished things before. I can't keep relying on my husband to come and help me every time I start to feel pressure of a project creep in, nor do I need him to anymore. I've come a long way since 2012, and thinking about that fires me up. You got this too. When you're under pressure, crush that self-doubt and anxiety with thoughts of things you've overcome before. And if that doesn't work, blast under pressure, because music therapy works too. And there you have it. Being creative can get a little scary, but never let that fear stop you from making artwork and putting yourself out there. Also keep in mind that you're here in the Midwest. We're the friendliest part of the country, here to support each other and cheer on your hard work. I can talk about my mistakes and shortcomings literally all day, and what I've learned from them, but I'm a product of my environment. The Midwest has made me humble and has taught me to take pride in my work. It also has brought me the best clients who are also on board for creating work that inspires others, even if it's inspiration to take Instagram photos. I see people from other parts of the country complain on social media that they're going through slow periods of work, which is totally fine and definitely happens, but I beg them to come to Cleveland because the creative work here is overflowing, and there's a group of people here that are so open to new and creative ideas. I am most grateful for growing up in the Midwest and absolutely loving where I live because it has given me a career that I never thought was possible. and because I get to see other people like me exceed in their dreams too. So thank you so much.